welcome to the Consultants Blueprint. Earlier this afternoon, we delivered the first time, and now we're delivering the second time, hopefully even better than the first one. And we're gonna deep dive into what is on the screen here, McKinsey Problem Solving Meeting AI. And the promise of today's hour is that by the end of today's workshop, you'll be able to start solving complex problems faster and with more confidence, right? You will know where to start, even in tough, unclear situations, which baristas, McKinsey consultants find themselves in very often in projects. And you're going to do that without hesitation, right? And I'll tell you why this is important in a bit. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Flavio from Brazil, based in Germany, and I have a business background. In essence, I started my career uh, starting small companies. Then I started my consulting career, spent several years in companies such as Arthur D. Little and McKinsey. Did a lot of complex problem solving there with market entry, cost cutting, customer journeys, etc. Working with top management and top government officials as well. And then I started my non-consulting career, right? First as international expansions manager at SumUp payments company. So seeing the world outside consulting and the execution, how it works in a company, and as a founder with Hybrid Academy, right, since 2019. On the personal side, love swimming, love teaching, games, and psychology. But I'll let now my colleague Byron also introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here this evening or this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm here from Cape Town, South Africa, so it's evening time this side. Yeah, so quick about me, as you can see on the slide, the classic business background. From an experience perspective, spent a ton of time in the consulting world at McKinsey for about 4.5 years, then internal strategy role. And nowadays, I oscillate between trying to be an entrepreneur as well as a fractional operator, which basically means I play various advisory roles for companies. When I'm not trying to solve problems, which I'm very passionate about, and I'm actually very passionate about teaching problem solving, I like to spend a lot of time in nature. That's either with my dog, on the bodyboard in the ocean, or running. And every now and again, I convince my wife to join on some of those fun activities. But yeah, thanks very much for making the time this evening, and looking forward to spending the next hour with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Byron. And apart from us, there are over 60 ex-McKinsey, Bain, BCG consultants in our hybrid faculty, and they're coming from different backgrounds and locations, but they all share this background and also a passion for teaching. And this passion translates into our reviews. We're very, very proud to hold our 4.9 stars on Trustpilot, and that means that our students and people who trust us are happy with our courses, and we do our best to keep it so. Now I have a question for you. When you see the speed of AI advancements, have you wondered about the safety of your career in the next 5 to 10 years? So Paulo is going to apply a poll right now. If you can, with one click, tell us how you feel about it. Awesome. I think that's good. Let's take a look at the results. All right. So 61% frequently, 18% occasionally. So this group is similar, like 80% saying frequently or occasionally, just like the former group, which means that, okay, a lot of people are thinking about it very often and with a reason, right? It's not an unfounded fear. I think there is definitely a lot of news going on right now about AI, and we see the speed that things are going, and we kind of project, okay, where is this gonna go or gonna end in the next 5 years or 10. So thank you very much, Paulo. Well, as I said, it's a founded fear, right, to be replaced or to have your career disrupted. This is a study by McKinsey saying that 30% of the hours currently worked in the US could be automated by 2030, right? If you look at our industry, for instance, education and workforce training, before the AI boom, we expected maybe 8% of our hours to be automated. Now it's 20 plus, almost 25%. So a big shift and a big change. And although in the beginning there was a lot of like AI doomers saying like, oh my God, we are all going to be replaced and robots are going to do all the work, it didn't really materialize yet, right? It doesn't mean that the tsunami has been canceled, right? It's just taking a bit longer. But right now, they're very, very smart engineers working very, very hard with billions of funding from VCs to automate work, right? To essentially create AI agents that will take chunks of work that are small in the beginning, right? And get bigger and bigger over time. So we haven't seen the full impact yet. The good news is that you can prepare for it, right? And the running for the hills here is to upskill, right? But being strategic about upskilling. Like no one, I don't recommend you to start learning Python perhaps today from zero, right? Maybe yes, for fun and so on, but to be really inserted in the market of the software development now, the bar is very, very high, and we see a lot of juniors not finding employment there. So the key question is, are you seen or viewed as a top problem solver by your organization, right? Because if not, your business career could be disrupted in the next 5 years or 10, right? Tops. As a contributor working on simpler problems, there is a risk, right? And organizations we know, well, they don't put people over profits, right? They automate the jobs that they can. And here the way out is to sharpen your problem solving skills to get to a higher level as soon as possible. So the organization, your manager, the leadership sees that, right? And starts relying on you to take over more and more complex work. I can't promise this will protect us forever, but it's the best bet we have now. And it's backed up by data, right? We consultants love data. So the World Economic Forum says that problem solving is one of the top skills employers look for. It's broken down. So if I zoom in a little bit, into analytical thinking, creative thinking, and systems thinking, right? And they will stay there in the foreseeable. They are there for a long time, and they will stay there in the foreseeable future. Okay, Flavio, got it. Problem solving is important, but AI has got pretty smart. So why can't we ask AI to solve complex problems for us? That's a great question. Well, our answer to that is that using AI in problem solving requires a step-by-step layered approach. Only then you can get the best solutions. So suppose you get your problem, you write down your context, you write down everything that you know about the problem, you upload PDFs and tables and talk about stakeholders and so on. You give AI everything and say, please find me the way out. What is the solution for this? What's the optimal idea? This is what you're gonna get, right? A very, let's say, sad cake because you're essentially trying to give too much information upfront, and AI starts behaving in a way that it doesn't pay attention to the most important things. It forgets things, right? It might focus different thing. They might not take into consideration all the variables that you're sharing. Whereas if you do it in a layered approach, like baking a cake in layers with human thinking, and then you stop to apply AI, then you think again and apply AI, that's how you get very far with complex problems. And that's what makes this workshop different. So you can emerge as a top 1% professional if you acquire the right skill set and use AI the right way. And today you'll start learning how. So on to you, Byron.
Perfect. So, what are we going to get through in the next 50 minutes? Three things. We're going to introduce a case to you called Orbiter. Then we're going to jump into applying our problem-solving method and leveraging AI with this case. Don't worry, we're going to guide you through this process. And then we're going to wrap up talking about how you can take your learning journey further, that you can really avoid that tsunami. Cool. Good evening, everybody. You've got a new job. You've been hired by Orbiter, and what you've been hired by Orbiter as is their Chief Strategy Officer. Next slide, please, Flavia. What I want to say is I'm going to talk, but I would strongly suggest that you put the phones away that we all have very close by. You get out a notebook and a pen, and you write things down. The more you participate in this, the more you're going to learn from this. So let's go. Okay, so what does Orbiter do? Smart homes. For many of you, you might live in them or you might live in a smart city, but very simply, think about everything connected with sensors and multiple applications. So, Internet of Things, that's what we're talking about. Don't worry, you don't need to be an expert. So, let's talk about the specific product they have called Orbiter Hub, which is really this one central hub that connects everything. They've got a clear price point and a clear market, 200 euros in Western European markets. They've got good traction to date in terms of over 200,000 hubs installed, and they're turning about 40 million euros in annual revenue. Sounds good, right? Now, I told you you've been hired as the Chief Strategy Officer. Why? Because growth has stalled. And we can see this from the 20% to the 3%. And our job is bring back Orbiter to a high growth trajectory. Importantly, we're not using this to teach you about the industry of smart homes or smart products or things like that. We're using this as a teaching tool to really explain the methodology of problem solving and how we bring about the human AI approach that Flavio introduced. So let's shift our mindset from having a problem to a challenge and let's get ready to take notes. We're going to hear first from the CEO and then we're going to get an email from the Chief Marketing Officer. Just to prep you, you're going to get a ton of information. So capture what you can and then let's go.
Wonderful. Let's see what the CEO has to say.
I am really glad you are here. Fresh eyes and sharp minds are exactly what we need, and I am excited to work with you. We have a product people love, yet growth has flattened, and that is why I want you in the room. I will share what I believe is happening. First, the product. I worry that we layered in too many options and screens. When simple tasks take longer, people get less excited and stop recommending us. I am fairly sure this is hurting us.
Okay, so as you can see, the CEO is giving hypothesis of what's happening, right? So too many features, too many clutter, too much clutter is actually preventing people from recommending the product because they don't love it, right? She will share a few more. Pay attention, and we'll continue.
I also want you to check the shift of some automations to the cloud. If the product feels less private, it can turn off our European customers. I am not certain here, so bring me evidence. Pricing is next. We raise the hub list price without adding something visible in the box. If shoppers cannot see the extra value right away, conversion drops. Channels matter a lot too. We stepped back from physical retail just when rivals doubled down on live demos. That was a mistake. Also look at convenience. Many competitors now offer click and collect and even same-day delivery, while we still route most orders to standard shipping. Finally, competitive presence. Some rivals secured premium and exclusive shelf placement. If customers cannot see us, they cannot choose us. I am confident this is costing us share. Find out what's going on. Propose the fastest corrective action. I am thrilled to have you on board, and I cannot wait to see what you uncover.
This message
Right.
will self-destruct in 5, 4.
But but now we've got a ton of data and six different things that the CEO threw at us, and now the Chief Marketing Officer has sent us an email. So give this a quick read, and then I'll call out one or two key points. Okay, so we're sitting in a world where we've probably got 9 to 10 different hypotheses, and this is common. We have lots and lots of data. Anyone you speak to will have a perspective. So, what would you do first in this situation? If you were the new Chief Strategy Officer, which is the job you have, what would you do first? And if we can get people to just pop that in the chat, what's the one thing you do, your first step now that you've got all this information?
Yes, don't be afraid of participating, folks. Just drop one approach or something in the chat that you think is important to do at the beginning.
Nice. Cool. Great. So as we're going, yeah. So today, the thing is, as we can see in the chat, people have different ways to start. And basically, the key takeaway is there's no one right way. And what this means is that we've got a complex problem and there's different ways to tackle it. And it's easy to get lost. But today, you're going to learn a tried and tested method not to get lost, or what I call a map to find the treasure. And the treasure in this case is solving the problem. Perfect. Flavio, over to you.
Thank you, Byron. Exactly. So I second that. Thank you for the participation in the chat. Like for such an important skill, which is problem solving, it's really daunting and actually shocking that we don't teach it at school. We don't teach it at university, right? I'm talking about 99% of the courses, 99% of the institutions we know. we don't get trained in companies actually to do it in a structured fashion, right? Unless you're working in a top management consulting firm, because without it, you cannot survive. So it's very easy to get a lot of ideas on how to start. And maybe some of those steps are indeed among the first steps, but people cannot really agree on what has to be done for a strong start in problem solving. So let's take a look at that. That's why we are here for. First step is problem definition. We define it very clearly. What is the problem or opportunity, if you want to call it like that we're talking about? And this is crucial to not only address it, but also to get alignment among the stakeholders of what you're trying to solve and to get agreement on when the problem is actually solved. Then we move on to problem structuring, which is one of my favorite parts. We are dealing with complexity, so we have to break things down into manageable, understandable parts. And that's where we also create hypotheses. That's the reason why we structure in the first place, to create hypotheses about what's happening. We move on to step number 3, which is extremely important and skipped so often, which is pre-analysis. So instead of getting the numbers and trying to crunch the data and doing analysis, we first have to prioritize which root causes really make sense to go for first in our investigation. Then we craft a storyline, something that makes sense. Okay, A is causing B, that is causing the problem that we see today, something in those lines, right? And we use the storyline to just align the work of the team and to also keep the stakeholders informed about the working hypothesis. Or when I say hypothesis, I mean the best guess and the best answer that we have with information at hand, right? Which can be wrong, and that's why we actually apply problem solving to prove ourselves wrong and try to get to the best answer. Then only then we invest time in step number 4, which is analysis. Here we collect the data and we try to find the easiest possible way to validate or reject the hypothesis or the story that you're trying to build, right? Sometimes just talking to an expert or checking yourself something on the technology side, on the internet, or sometimes it requires advanced analytics, right? A lot of data, machine learning, and for you to actually find out and prove the root cause. Those 4 steps are called the diagnosis or foundation. And I have 2 important takeaways for it. An extremely common mistake is to jump into solutionizing too early without having completed a proper diagnosis, right? We know how catastrophic this can be, like in medicine, for instance, if you're treating the wrong disease, and of course in business as well, as an analogy. However, if the root cause of the problem is already clear to you, accepted by everyone, this is causing the problem, this is what we need to solve, and truly beyond doubt, then you can skip the first 4 steps, right? We start from step number 5, which is structuring and pre-analysis of the initiatives, right? What are the solutions? Again, we diverge, we expand, we think about all possibilities, and normally we don't do that so well. And we jump too fast into our favorite ones, and we ignore some other equally or even more interesting opportunities. We also create a storyline. You hear that word a lot when you work in projects in consulting, because it's the bread and butter of consultants to have a story, right? Or a draft slide deck, something like this. We also do analysis here, of course, but the analysis is a bit different. This time is more predictive. So you have to model, for instance, a financial model, an operational model. What is going to happen if we tweak here and there? What is the impact that we expect based on assumptions and based on hard data as well? Once you have the validated initiatives, you need to prioritize. We know resources are scarce, so time, money, right? People, attention, and everything is scarce. So we need to order things in a way that it's most beneficial for us to implement. And I would say that the companies that win and the teams that win are not the teams that do all things that have to be done. They actually choose the right order to do things, right? That's the most important thing. And finally, we present, right, if needed, for people who are going to implement, for people who are going to approve, or people who need to be informed about what we're going to do. Those 4 last steps are called the design or solutionizing, of course, because we are solving the problem. And folks, what you're learning here is actually a distillation of hundreds of years of project experience, right, at top consulting firms, and is now condensed to you in only 8 steps. Okay, so come on, if you find this difficult, you have never assembled an IKEA chair or table, and I hope that you can. We will deep dive, right? But if you can follow those 8 steps um, in your problem solving, we're definitely gonna get better results. It takes time to master. We don't expect people to be next week, like being able to do all of those things really well and really fast. It's a lifelong skill, but if you master it, you become invaluable, right? And unfireable too. All right. So where is the, going back to the World Economic Forum, right? Creative thinking and problem solving is where you expand, is where you actually are trying to get as many ideas as possible and trying to diverge, right? To create possibilities. And oftentimes we jump too fast into the next step. But the other step is equally important, which is analytical thinking, which is to really look at the numbers, look at the ideas, and trim down and focus. So where does the problem solving methodology come from? What do you think? Tell us in the chat. What do you think is the origin of all of that we're talking about? Math and science, scientific method, spot on. Very good, right? So this is the scientific method, right? But it's combined with even more creativity and more teamwork, right? So that it's targeted at business problem solving specifically. But the origin is the 1600s, right? It's just that consulting firms, because they have to solve complex problems again and again and again, they perfected this, right, in order to be efficient, in order to deliver, let's say, impact with small teams. And that's why we want to actually democratize this system, because it works so well. So it's time proven. It's responsible for unlocking trillions, and this is not an exaggeration, trillions of dollars of value for organizations and governments, right? Projects are usually confidential, so we don't see on the media like which projects consultants are helping with, but you can be sure that behind every big billion-dollar decision, there are strategy consultants as well. So using AI in problem solving requires this layered approach, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, and this is our differentiating factor at Highbridge. We really teach people how to apply AI step by step using human judgment on the way, right? And this is important because with AI, like, we run the risk of relying too much, outsource too much of our thinking, and essentially become more stupid. But this is this is a risk for sure, but this can be managed if we use it the right way. So all very nice, Flavio, but what is the usefulness of all of that, right? Why are we here, sitting here? Don't you have anything better to do on a Tuesday? I hope. But where can you apply more problem solving, right? Well, you can apply on professional and personal problems. And here's just a long list of examples, right? The list is infinite, but you can reduce customer churn, you can decrease operational costs, you can improve employee retention, essentially problems that someone in your company is tackling. If it's not you in your area, like someone is addressing that complexity and facing complex questions all the time. On the personal side, I think everybody has had some of those challenges, right? To balance work, family, and personal time, reduce expenses, find career development opportunities, managing stress. Those are also opportunities for you to apply structured problem solving. And again, someone is doing it, right? When you think of your job and you think that you're not solving really complex problems today, it means that people are not trusting you yet to do it, right? Because these problems certainly exist. They are keeping people awake, and like directors, VPs, senior managers, C-level, founders, they are thinking about those problems every day, every week, right? The challenge is you cannot stay at a simple problem level for very long in the scenario that we're living here, right? At least for white collar jobs and with the advancement of AI, right? So we need to prove that even on smaller problems, you can apply a structured methodology to find the best answer, and then show and get visibility so that people give you more space to participate. They'll say, hey, this person did such a good job in this particular situation. Bring them on board for the next challenge as well, right? And that's how you become essential to your company and unfireable. So let's start today deep diving into the 3 first steps, right? They are completely free for you. And the idea is to show you what's possible and inspire you to want to learn more. Brian.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Cool. So, first step, problem definition. Yeah. Let's talk about what we really mean about this and why it matters. And for me, very simply, it's about the fact that we all see the world in a different way. And if I said to everybody, please, can you go design me a chair, everyone would design the chair differently. So, the whole idea about problem definition is creating a common language, a common understanding about what we're solving, why we're solving it, what is success like, and what are the boundary conditions. So we're going to go through that now. Next slide. Perfect. So when we start with
Sorry, it was a misclick. There
all
you go.
good, we're back in it. So we start with the situation, which is essentially a factual assessment of where are we today. And the reason we have this is to ensure that everybody understands that fact base the same way. Next one. Once we've got the situation, we then have the complication, which very simply is about what has emerged from the situation that's either burning or the impetus for a problem to be solved. Next slide. And situation complication isn't something theoretical. We see this used. So here's a really good example of an executive summary, which would be kind of the first part of a presentation that would be shared with an executive team, where BCGs use the situation complication to tee up the rest of the work that they've done. Next slide. Then we've got from the situation complication, it tees up the question. And as Flavio was saying, there's a diagnosis component and design component. We have a question for each. What's crucial is that your question follows logically from the situation and complication. Said differently, if you should be able to roll back from the question and the complication should follow and the situation should follow from that. Next slide. Then we have the success criteria, which is a combination of what deliverables will we have or what outcomes do we want for different people. Scopes and constraints is really what's in scope, out of scope. So in the orbit case, we'd really need to think about geographies. We need to think about features. We need to think about customers. And constraints is things that we can't change. So for example, budget. And this really matters because if we don't know that, we could be solutioning at a later stage for the infinite world, which is not possible. And finally, when we think about stakeholders, we need to think about those that are going to sign off on the project and those that could either help our work or could completely derail our work. Finally, we talk about benchmarking, which is really to say what the problem we face today, someone else has faced this. Either it's been faced in the organization or it's been faced by another company. So very quickly, let's not reinvent the wheel and let's learn from others in terms of how we think about the challenge we face.
Maybe you look at this template, right, folks, and there are 7 dimensions here. We select them after a lot of thinking and a lot of discussion of what is the minimum necessary information to frame a problem. We strongly recommend for you to use something like that because it gives method, right? So if every challenge that is a bit more complex, you use the same method, it starts becoming easier for you to work with, right? If your team is always using the same language and so on as well. But maybe you look at this like, I'm not ready to fill out all this information about my problem. I need more information, right? How can we learn more about the problem before defining it? Well, one of the key strategies or techniques you can use is data segmentation, right? You can use some data visualization software, for instance, like Tableau, Power BI. And here's our cake again, to slice the cake and look at data from different angles and different categories. So maybe you find out that your problem is actually concentrated in a segment. It's not like homogeneous or it's not everywhere. So therefore, you can use segmentation as a means to find out and learn more about the situation. So what segmentations could we try for Orbita's growth case? I'll test 2 with you. Let's take a look at, for instance, online versus offline sales. So e-commerce, right, versus retail. We have retail partners. They sell our hub for the smart homes and so on. So you can see here that this stagnation, it's kind of there are two things happening, right? Online is growing, offline is decreasing, and then the overall net effect is stagnation. So it's important to question the data and look beyond averages, beyond totals. And that's what we always do in consulting very early on, to gather a fact pack and learn about the problem a little bit more. One quick hypothesis that you could have here is that, oh, I guess that people are switching from offline to online. So they are buying more on the internet. But we already took a look at this particular hypothesis very quickly. And we saw that it's not the same postcodes. So it's not really happening as let's say, a cannibalization effect. And because also the competitors are doing well in offline. So we'll have to take a look at other things. Now, another way to slice the data would be by country or geography. And here we have major countries. And if we look at the data, we can see that, and here, attention of the axis, right? So it's from right to left. We can see that there is a bit of higher concentration on the big countries, but none of them is actually dropping or standing out too much. So we've learned a little bit. And to fast forward, because we don't have a lot of time today together, we filled out the the problem definition draft for Orbita, right? And if you take a look at it, the situation is what we already told you, the complication as well. The diagnosis question is, why have offline sales decreased? So our question improved a little bit from stagnation to offline decreasing, which is what we saw, right? And our design question is, how can Orbita return to a growth path within 12 months? This question is not perfect yet, right? It can be polished, but it's important that you start somewhere, right? And then you iterate your problem definition towards a version that is accepted, is detailed enough for you. Then we have the success criteria, some scope and constraints, and so on. So remember the cake again, the layered approach, right? To have a happy, high cake. Well, for you, we prepared AI tools to facilitate this process. So Paulo is going to share in the chat the first AI tool. The first one is a problem definition creator. It's a custom GPT from OpenAI that you can use so that you write it faster, right? It's going to interview you about the problem. It's going to ask you about the dimensions. And once you're done, it's going to write a beautiful polished text about it that you can check again if it's correct, right? But even more interesting is the second tool that we created, which is a critic to our problem definition. And our critic does, first of all, it does four things. First, an influence versus resistance heat map, because criticizing the problem definition is very useful from the lenses of the stakeholders. Who are the key people that have to agree with that, right? Here in our case, CTO, CEO, CPO, and CFO, right? And then we can see what is the influence probably concentrated, where is the resistance probably concentrated. We also do some alignment pockets and tension. So among those stakeholders, because these GPT will ask about their goals, will ask about their personality, their views. It will assume a few things as well, right, from what you say. So normally it gets it very sharp assumptions about the people and how they can be entering a conflict or be in a conflict. It helps you with the risks of this problem definition. So for instance, a CEO that is more, let's say, visionary, it might see the problem definition as too timid, right? Might push for success criteria that is a bit more ambitious. And finally, challenge questions is input, food for thought. I think the best way to use AI is actually to have it ask you questions, right? And not give you answers. And here's what it does. So it talks about each dimension and makes you think about what you wrote, okay? But for it to work, you have to give the first draft. So here's a couple of examples of output. Our GPT in this case rewrote the situation complication with more detail, the diagnosis and the design questions as well. For instance, our design question is not smart enough. If you remember what smart means, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So final thoughts on problem definition before we move on to step number 2 is, yes, it takes a bit of time people are not used to investing, but slowing down will pay off, right? Too many projects have gone wrong because this step wasn't done or was not done properly. And if you have a bit more years of work experience like us, you know that, right? It's very annoying to do rework, to waste, to have a project canceled because it was not defined well. Bring
Mm.
others on board. Of course, your stakeholders are your clients, right? Internally, externally. Be optimistic. We're talking about complex problems. If it was easy, then you don't need all of that. Be ready to shatter beliefs. So question the assumptions. And again, don't jump too fast into solutionizing, and revisit throughout the project. It's a living document. So I recommend you to fill out a template, whatever template you decide to fill, and always paste it at the beginning of key discussions and presentations to remind people of what is the problem definition, what are you trying to solve, where are you doing in the whole process, right? And change it if necessary. Byron?
Perfect. So let's assume that we've got to this aligned problem definition. Now we need to disaggregate this problem into its component pieces, and this is where problem structuring comes through. So we're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how. So the what is, as I mentioned, you cut essentially a big problem into the smaller pieces. Why do we do this? Well, because complex problems aren't straightforward, and it's much easier to tackle parts of a problem and then put it back together than trying to solve a whole problem together. And how do we do this? Well, there's different approaches, which we'll actually see on the next slide. So let's jump forward. So on the left-hand side, we've got probably consultants like bread and butter, which is an issue tree, also called could be a driver tree, it could be a hypothesis tree, but essentially you've got the root and then the branches that span out. In the middle, we've got mind maps, we've got a central idea and pieces linked to it, but it doesn't even have to be that complex. You could literally have a piece of paper and put down like a key heading and the sub pieces to that, and another key heading and the sub pieces to that. So there's different approaches to this. So let's talk about three things you probably didn't know about structuring. If we jump forward. Cool. This is about having a day one answer. What is a day one answer? It means knowing where to start looking for your keys if you miss them. I said earlier on the earlier call today that this morning I had this problem that I couldn't find my keys, and my wife was saying, just look where you always look. And what she was really saying is you've got a hypothesis, and that's based off experience. The idea about having a hypothesis driven approach is that we can't focus on everything because not everything is going to matter equally. We've got to use our judgment based over experience of where to look. And if we think about a good example, if we jump forward, would be Christopher Columbus, who had a hypothesis on where to go on their voyages and tried a bunch of things. Some worked, some didn't, and they updated their thinking and they rethought their hypothesis. And that's crucial. We really need to have a hypothesis, go and test and refine as we go along. So that was the first thing, right? Second thing, using McKinsey breakdowns. Now, it's almost 9 o'clock here in South Africa. I'm pretty hungry. So let's talk about pizzas. And then let's talk about how pizzas connect to mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive breakdowns. If you order a pizza and some of your slices are missing, you're annoyed. If you order a pizza and some of your slices are stuck on top of each other, you're annoyed. Well, maybe not you, but most people are. So how does that link to mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive? Let's focus on the top right-hand quadrant. I want a pizza where all my pieces are there. It's collectively exhaustive, yeah? And I want a pizza delivered to me where the pieces aren't on top. That's mutually exclusive. So it's crucial when we disaggregate problems that we have mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive structures. Next slide. When we think about how we could do that, Highbridge has got a really helpful way to think through this. It could either be at a point in time, which is what a photo is, or over time, or you could think about a quantitative breakdowns, think numbers, or qualitative, think words. Let's jump forward and look at an example. So here's a really good example of at a point in time, quantitative breakdown, an algebraic approach, which for me is like amazing. Yeah. And I generally tell people when it comes to any kind of problem structuring, try and find a issue tree that you can do mathematically on this because an equation is by definition mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Let's jump forward. Cool. Finally, if you're not iterating, you're failing to learn. What does that mean? Problem structuring is an iterative process, meaning you put down a thought, the human component. You then test it with AI, the AI component. You get some feedback, and then you go and test it with your team or your colleagues. That's the human component again. You test it with AI. You then get some other feedback. So it's all about iteration, and it's all about this being a team sport on this. And the final thing I'll say, just as we move to the next slide, is that as Flavio was saying, that you can constantly refine your problem definition. If you need to update your structure, then your problem definition probably needs to change, and vice versa on this. Cool.
Thank you, Byron. Let's see an example because it will become more tangible for you, right? What is McKinsey and McKinsey breakdowns if you never heard of it? So first of all, where did we stop in Orbita? We got hypotheses from the CEO and the CMO, right? It's very important that we listen to the people, right? Because they might have very valid points and good starting points. It's not the answer yet, but it's a good starting point. And here's a few things that the CEO mentioned, right? The feature creep, increasing complexity, automation moved to work to the cloud, so privacy concerns, the list price increased, pullback from physical retail, which matches the problem that we have in retail, and so on. The CMO said, lagging behind consumer trends and behavior change, targeting the wrong audience, creative fatigue, but something about the e-commerce layout being outdated. And since we're focusing on offline sales, some of the hypotheses became irrelevant, right? So you have to have the power to also say no to things. Like this is not in scope, right? The question we try to answer is offline sales drop, and there we focus. So you can collect the hypotheses from the experts. You don't need to know everything or work alone, right? Your power is in your method. And a crisp problem definition gives you the clarity needed to ignore some hypotheses and reduce complexity. Remember, we expand, but we also narrow down. And we're going to do it even further. But first, how best to organize those hypotheses? And this is when we use the famous word framework, right? We can use predetermined structures called frameworks, or we can create our own structure from scratch. But in this case, there is a famous and useful framework we can use. For instance, maybe you heard about the 3 C's and the 4 P's, right? If not, here they are. Customer, company, competitors. So this is the 3 C's. So customer changes, so anything in trends, in behavior, in purchase behavior, or so on. Changes in our company or what we offer, actually, which is broken down into the 4 P's of marketing: product, pricing, place, here in channel, and promotion. Or competitor changes, right? Something that they did. And we classify the hypothesis, so it gives us clarity to know what are we talking about, and in a messy way, right? Because we can isolate the topic and talk about it without overlaps. Now, what else can be happening? Now it's trying to be exhaustive, right? Collectively exhaustive. We can add a few things here. So first of all, let's organize offline sales into the customer, offering, and changes in competition. And then we can go a layer or two deeper, right? Customer buying criteria, for instance. What do people care about when they buy in smart homes? This is important and relevant to solve this problem. They care about price, the user friendliness, compatibility, reliability, privacy. And have we changed something? Maybe we did. And actually, the CEO said we changed a lot of things. So features, packaging might have changed. So it was not initially, we didn't talk about changes in packaging, but we need to consider that as well and check perhaps if it's an important hypothesis. Pricing, list prices and discounts, and changes in channel, right? So if you're talking about retail, this is extremely important branch. So the number of points of sale we have, the mix, have we changed the mix from big retailer to smaller retailers, right? For instance, shelf placement, very important. How visible are the devices? Are we losing shelf space? Sales force incentives, because maybe it's a consultative, probably this is a consultative sale, right? You need to explain the product, you need to convince the customer and so on. So are they pushing for it, or are they, maybe competitors are paying more incentives, right? Or they changing the incentives in some way. Level of availability, or for instance, the level of stockouts that you have. This can also influence. So all those things, they were not mentioned by the CEO and CMO, but if we start thinking in a structured, exhaustive manner, we might list those as well. And then changes in promotion, as well as changes in competition, which can be any of those 4 P's as well, right? To help you, don't worry, we also come to the rescue, we have a third AI tool built for you. And by the way, these tools are built on top of like a lot of project experience, a lot of try and error, and business like consulting projects that some of them went well, some of them didn't go well, but all of that condensed into learnings for you to help you structure and define problems better. Okay, and you can use this one to actually help you augment your thinking. Again, we don't encourage you to ask AI, please give me all the hypotheses or structure this for me, but you give the first draft, the human thinking, because it sets the boundaries, it sets the direction, and you ask it to make it more exhaustive. Byron.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's talk about pre-analysis diagnosis and really coming to what I talk about, bringing my scissors and trimming the tree. So we had Flavio speak through this. Great. Now, the reality is we can't focus everywhere and we shouldn't focus everywhere because not everything matters equally. So we need to prioritize. And if we don't, we'll do this anxious parade of knowledge, which basically means just saying a lot of things without being focused. And no board or executive team is going to find that credible and actually will find that a waste of their time. So, how do we avoid this? Now, let's jump forward one more. Pareto principle is what's going to guide us. Many of you might know this, but basically what it says is that we need to exert 20% of the effort to find 80% of the impact. This was developed by an Italian economist, Wilfred Pareto, many years ago and actually exists in many things. So how does this help us in problem solving if we jump forward? We've got to prioritize and we're trying to find the 20% of things that we should focus on. In this case, the 20% of the hypotheses that are going to give us 80% of the effort. So we need a structured approach to prioritization, and you can come up with different dimensions on this 2x2. What's important is that those dimensions need to be relevant to the problem that we're trying to solve, is the first thing. And the second thing is it's actually not about what we prioritize. It's about why we prioritize what we have, and what you're trying to lift out is the trade-offs or decisions that people make. So let's jump forward one more. Yeah, perfect. So over here, what we've got is an allocation of the hypotheses to the different quadrants. And essentially what we're trying to look at is this top right-hand quadrant where it's low effort to test and high likelihood to be true. And there we see that we've got 3 that have come out, 5, 6, and 7. And really what we do then, we'd even prioritize one step further and say, let's start with hypothesis 6. Yeah, because it's the furthest to the right. We'd go and test that, see what we can learn. After that, maybe move to number 5 or number 7 and keep going. But we'd start with the highest priority first, keeping this 80-20 principle in mind. Next. So once you've done this prioritization, where you can get to is you can start telling a story. And that's where we'd get to. We'd say, right, we're clear on the problem to be solved. We've broken it down into its component parts, prioritized, and now we've got to tell the story of what is the end state of this piece of work. And the storyline is crucial because it guides the rest of our work, it guides how we communicate to our clients and stakeholders, and it guides the document that we would make at the end. But these were only 3 steps. There's still another 5. So Flavia, how are we going to move forward?
Yes. So as you see, folks, we have a lot to say, and actually we can go a lot deeper in each one of those steps. 1 hour is barely enough to scratch the surface. But in this case, right, we would go further with this project. We would still have to conduct the analysis to prove or not the root causes. Maybe there is a major root cause. Maybe there are 2 or 3 that are equally or similarly contributing to the effect, right, to the drop in sales in offline retail. Then we would have to solutionize that, right? How can we revert this trend with initiatives? We expand, we use AI again, we decide which ones to focus on initially, we analyze them, and here we need to model things and do some number crunching and statistical analysis sometimes. We prioritize the ones that are most promising according to several criteria, including scope and constraints from the problem definition, right? We have to look back. Then we prioritize, and then after that, we present the synthesis, right? The final presentation. And if you remember what I said about storylines in the beginning, the difference between a structured problem-solving approach and a non-structured problem-solving approach is one of the differences is the following. In a structured problem-solving approach, you start early with the story, and you use it as a tool to prove or disprove your hypothesis. You change the story. You don't change the data. You change the story according to the data, and until you have something that is working and it's getting to the answer, right? And then you just polish it and present it. Whereas in unstructured problem solving, you actually do a lot of analysis, you create some random pages and so on, or like disconnected parts of the thing, and then in the end you see what sticks together and you try to put together Frankenstein that sometimes a lot of the things are wasted, a lot of the time has been put in, not used, is not used at all, and you might have missing links or missing logic right at the end. So sounds familiar? Maybe it is because it happens a lot. So now to the invitation for you, right? If you like this sort of content and this helps you think clearly, one myth that we hear and one belief that we hear a lot is I will naturally get better at problem solving over time, right? It's common, but it's a dangerous belief because getting good at this requires conscious effort, right? It's not only about experience, it's actually about method, about discipline, right? And about consistency. So that's why we believe in teaching those skills. We don't believe in just getting out there and solving problems the best way possible. So the first belief shattered. The second belief, I must be at McKinsey, Bain, or BCG to master elite problem solving skills. No, not really, right? Of course, you learn a lot in those firms, and we did, but you can learn the method and you can take advantage of the ones who went there, who worked 16 hours a day, suffered a lot, jokes apart, but you can use, leverage their time and our time, right, to learn these things. And you must be the Einstein of your organization to rank as a top 1% problem solver. Intelligence and raw intelligence is useful and important, but someone with method, right, with average intelligence and method can beat the Einsteins out there, right? Because you're going to get more consistent, you're going to be easier to work with, it's not going to be hit and miss all the time, right? You're going to get more results and visibility and predictability, which businesses love. Okay, so we shatter that as well. So the invitation we have for you today is to join our 2 workshops coming up, Structured Problem Solving 1 and 2, which have 7 hours of content and are going to be delivered twice still this year, right? In September and October, you have the dates there, the time zones as well. And it's important to go a bit deeper because in this short hour that we have together, as I said, it is to inspire you, it's to scratch the surface, but it can't really switch your modus operandi with just that, right? And we cover all the 3 steps in much more detail all over again, and we go through the other steps as well with enough time for questions and everything. So we go through the detailed steps, multiple real-world examples, the AI helpers, so you get more GPTs that were custom made for you to be more powerful and essentially have a consultant in your pocket. We learn through immersive projects. So we really make sure that you have a piece of paper that you think through, that you work out the problems, and you take home materials, all delivered by our faculty of ex-consultants, as I mentioned before, and with great reviews, right? I just need to say that if you're interested to learn more, you can also read them online. Okay. One last thing about pricing, right? How much does it cost? So this is a lot of value. Of course, we believe in the power of this. Otherwise, consultants wouldn't sell projects for millions. But they are priced in a very affordable manner, right? So problem solving 1, $350, problem solving 2, $350, that equals 700 if our math is right. However, that's not our best offer. Our last offer for this year is $297 as long as seats last, right, to attend these 2 workshops. But I have an even better deal for you today. The first 30 seats will be priced at only $97, right? It's a steal for the amount of content and the amount of value that this can have in your career and the impact that this has, right? However, it's valid only for the first person from an organization, university, or company attending, right? So run. If you are the first one, you can get this price. And until tomorrow, if you get the seat, you also unlock the replay. So if you have troubles connecting like live for the whole duration of the workshops, you can rewatch it later. Okay, again, years and years of project experience synthesized and delivered for you in an immersive, fun, and very comfortable way, right? That will deliver results. Highbridge has a universe of courses, so this is the one that we recommend to you if you're interested in getting ahead. But you can also consider our full Business Excellence Bootcamp, where you learn also about slides, more about storytelling, stakeholders management, and communication. There are like 10 workshops. These are 2 workshops. This one has 10 workshops. So you can also consider that, or you can upgrade later, right, if you wish. And if you want to become a consultant, we also help with that. It's our specialty. Module 1 help you with the interview, Module 2 with work skills, and Module 3 with leadership skills. If you want to tell us about your situation and learn more about these products, you can schedule a discovery call. Paulo is sharing with you in the chat both the link to to join the problem solving 1 and 2 and my Calendly of 15 minutes. And that's it, folks. We hope we are on time. Yes, 1 minute to the hour. Very good. Byron, thank you so much for
Yeah, you're so
today.
welcome.
And it was a pleasure again to deliver this with you. Until next one.
Thanks
Everybody,
a lot, everybody.
thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you soon inside Highbridge. Bye-bye.